I was going to call this, well, I did call this the Friday night stream, and then I thought, I'm going to talk about mental illness because this has been one of my abiding interests about mental conditions. We all remember a time when we were called mad as children call each other mad. They call each other mad and silly for doing things that maybe other children wouldn't do or wouldn't talk about. And when we talk about mental illness, what do we really mean? According to this article, mental illness is synonymous with mental health disorders and refers to a range of mental health conditions, disorders that affect your mood, thinking, and behavior. Examples of mental illness include depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behaviors. So, if you're addicted to drink and drugs, you have a mental illness. If you have an eating disorder, which could mean eating too much or too little, it's a mental health issue. And you might occasionally feel blue or anxious about something, and that's also a mental illness. You see, that's what I didn't quite agree with. Okay, my childish understanding was mental illness equals schizophrenia, which means literally seeing, hallucinating. And then as you go through life, you realize that there are lots of things that can cause you to appear to be mad if you have a certain fixed view about life that others don't share. But then you could just be called non-mainstream or fringe, and you will be treated as if you were mad or treated as if you were a social pariah. In which case you might as well be a lunatic in an asylum. But what I've noticed today is that people can be quite lucid on whatever they're fixed on. So, okay, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that if you believe in a certain thing, then you would actually be quite logical in thinking, well, if I believe this thing, then I would do this and I would say that, and you know, and it would be logical and it would be a coherent whole, even if you don't think, even if others don't agree with you. So, for example, if you think tomorrow you're, you will, aliens from outer space are going to land outside your home, and you would have to, the plan is for you to get inside their space vessel and be taken by them to wherever, not on this Earth, in another solar system, or wherever. So, with perfect consistency, you would be, well, saying goodbye to your friends and family and packing your things, and you know, and you would be sane, and you you could be behaving so sanely that people might just think you're going on. You're just leaving, never intending to come back. And your behavior would make sense on those grounds, even if people don't think that a space-worthy vessel would arrive or that you would go into it the next day. But your behavior and your speech would be quite lucid as far as that is concerned, as you talk about, you know, settling your affairs, giving away your things that you can't take away with you, all kinds of things, and you would make perfect sense. But you could be suffering a different kind of mental illness in which you just ramble on about nothing in particular, taking up a lot of time, and not be making any sort of sense. So you could be talking about, for example, religion. And a lot of people talk to me about these things, and they have no belief system that is in fact shared by anyone else. But they talk about their religion as if somebody else shared it and they don't, and you try to tell them that, well, it can't be a religion what you say you believe, because it's only a religion if other people share it. And it probably wouldn't work if just your twin brother shared it, or your family shared it, or it has to be bigger than a bigger group than just members of your immediate family, or it wouldn't be acknowledged as a proper religion unless the group was big enough, is what I'm trying to say. But you can be telling people this, but they would still insist that what they believe is a religion. And I know that people deliberately ignore what you say because they don't like it, they don't. And you don't know if they genuinely don't understand what you mean, or they think they can ignore you and nobody would care because it's just not that important a topic for people to make a fuss about it. So it would be like a madman saying whatever they want to say, and the psychiatric nurse humouring them, and in a way that sometimes spouses do, like say yes dear, whatever, no sir, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full, sir. So perhaps it's difficult to tell, and sometimes people just can't be bothered to argue with you, so they just go along with it and wait for you to finish so that they can say their thing that they want to say to you. Because but there you go. It's in so many ways. It's like birdsong. You wonder when you hear birdsong, well, why are they making all that noise? Of course, they want attention. They're calling for mates. We don't, I suppose, fully know why birds sing, except that but perhaps it's their way of asserting their identity and saying, well, I've got a different bird song to you, neighbour bird, and I'm singing to say that I'm available to for mating, or whatever it is. Maybe they're complaining about the weather. I mean, we don't really know. But it would be dismaying, I imagine, for birds to be told not to sing, and I'm sure they would be all terribly dismayed, as I'm sure we would be if we were all told that YouTube had closed down and we could no longer use YouTube nor any other kind of social media platform to post our views and our news. it wouldn't be just individuals who would be dismayed, it would be corporations, and governments, and politicians. They would be, well, dismayed and disappointed and wondering what the hell to do. But ultimately, truth is disputed. So what you assert as truth may be downgraded into, well, it's just your stupid opinion that you think is the truth. And actually, a lot of facts that most people accept as truth is hard to prove. I mean, climate change, for example, it's one of those truths, those facts that are in fact political, and we know from history that facts can be political, such as the fact that the Earth goes round the sun rather than the other way around. And, why was this even such a controversy? And obviously, it was because some people didn't want to admit that they were wrong, such as Catholics in the Catholic Church. They didn't want to acknowledge that the Catholic Church was wrong about such a thing because God knows what else they could have been wrong about. But eventually the truth came out. So, and for Aztecs, what they used as their state religion to make the sun come out again the next day was to sacrifice humans. And we don't know if they really believed it. Perhaps they thought, well, we've been doing it for so long, why shouldn't we? It's our tradition. And were the Aztecs mad or stupid or evil? Well, they're certainly evil in the sense that evil is unnecessary suffering that you, as one human, inflict on another. But then we could say, well, it's evil to hurt living creatures, even if they're not humans. And so there is a no-hide law against animal cruelty, the prohibition against eating an animal while it's still alive, which would be considered by most reasonable people, except that sometimes we think, oh dear, well, I did eat an oyster. Okay, so oysters are actually not a problem with Jews because they're not supposed to eat them anyway, but for Gentiles, shellfish is not forbidden to Gentiles. Muslims eat them. There's no prohibition against that. So are we eating an animal? Well, it's how we eat the oyster, isn't it? I mean, really, what we're supposed to do is we crush the oyster on the roof of our mouths, and then I guess then it's dead, and then, but if you nibble at it, then it's wrong. Then, you are eating part of an animal while it's still alive. I think I may have done that once, but I didn't know, I think at the time I didn't. I thought they were dead anyway. But now I know, so I won't do it again. Which is not to say I won't eat an oyster again. Well, there are things that we inadvertently do. So really, I am working up to saying that there are certain things that we shouldn't do, and we can find excuses for any evil act we do. I mean, if you want to be compassionate towards the Aztecs, you could say, well, they didn't know, and they were genuinely afraid that if they didn't sacrifice humans, the sun wouldn't rise the next day, and their whole civilization would come crashing down. You can make all kinds of excuses for them, but subsequently we know that we're not supposed to practice human sacrifice, though we know that peoples other than Aztecs practiced it. We know Christians practice it, don't we? I mean, they go on about Jesus dying for all our sins. And we think, and they are a universal religion, and the past 3 global empires have been Christian. So they have this belief that a man was required to die for all our sins. And it doesn't even make sense, but many of them continue to believe in it. So mental illness, an error, I mean, this is what it is, error, can exist in many minds, and still exist in many minds, because obviously, lots of things wrong with the world, lots of evil being committed for negligent, reckless, and intentional reasons. And I suppose it is possible that entire civilizations can be evil or mad or stupid, and in being stupid, evil, and mad, destroy themselves. And we know that civilizations have fallen because of some practice that they wouldn't give up. So let us read again this overview of mental illness. Mental illness, also called mental health disorders, refers to a wide range of mental health conditions, disorders that affect your mood, thinking, and behavior. Examples of mental illness include depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behaviors. Addictive behaviors that can include shopaholism, nymphomania, alcoholism, gambling. It continues. Many people have mental health concerns from time to time, but a mental health concern becomes a mental illness when ongoing signs and symptoms cause frequent stress and affect your ability to function. A mental illness can make you miserable and can cause problems in your daily life, such as at school or work or in relationships. In most cases, symptoms can be managed with a combination of medications and talk therapy, psychotherapy. Now, talk therapy, psychotherapy is something I provide for others. And I think others use YouTube as a way of talking through and thinking through their problems. We know that Daniel Sienkiewicz has been known to have 7-hour streams. Is that a mental illness? I don't know. Perhaps he's not really interested in writing things down, because if you write things down, yes, writing things down would actually be better, because it takes more effort to write than it is to ramble on incessantly. And because of the greater intellectual effort required to write things down in a grammatical, way that makes sense, you have to order your thoughts more. When you put your thoughts down in sentences and paragraphs and pages, and that can release some of your depression, anxiety disorders, and whatever's on your mind. Because in the act of writing things down, you have to put your emotions into thoughts, and your thoughts into sentences, your sentences into paragraphs, and make them somehow make sense. And in this way, it is a kind of self-therapy, and you don't need to do it for 7 hours, but in a way it's a false economy. I think if you talk to yourself for 7 hours in order to get some thing in your mind clear. So is there something fundamentally disordered about the political discourse of the West? And of course my answer is yes. Something is desperately wrong. It doesn't make sense. Even to the people who are doing it to us. It makes very little sense. Hello, Howard. It is possible that I am addicted to streaming. Um, I hope that in my addiction I am making sense. I did change the title of this stream from Friday night stream into mental illness, and this would help me stay on topic, and rather than just me rambling on a Friday night. So there are certain criteria that I do bear in mind when I stream, and I think it has to be about something. Hopefully, it comes to a conclusion, even though it's a conclusion that I come to before, and and people have heard it before. So Mike is asking me if this is about Sam. Well, it's an amalgam of people. I mean, Sam obviously has a certain view of the arrival of the Messiah, which he is supposed to hold as a Jew. And he literally believes in it, and there are others who do believe it. I mean, I know Jews who think they are the Messiah. So this is not necessarily a mental illness. Unless you're going to call, people with any religion a mental illness. Because, if you have a belief system, then obviously you're supposed to believe in it, and it would be unfair to call somebody who believes literally in what he's supposed to believe as a believing Jew, a believing Christian, a believing Muslim. But then with Christians, what they're required to believe is so absurd. But then they have managed to conquer the world 3 times over with their 3 global empires. So I guess even people who would otherwise be accused of suffering from mental illness can function at some level. But perhaps what I'm working towards saying is that we won't really know what is the truth, because, well, there'll be lots of things that we won't know. I mean, people from previous generations wouldn't know that the earth was round, that the sun goes round, the earth goes round the sun, and various things like that. They wouldn't know. But then it wouldn't even be a matter of controversy for them, because, well, nobody would argue if the earth was round. if they weren't thinking of, well, sailing across oceans to come back the other side. So perhaps truth is simply something that is not disputed, even though perhaps what they believed in was wrong. So once upon a time, I suppose people thought the world was flat, but they never argued about it. So it was never, it never became an issue, as people call it. It was never an issue about whether the earth was round or flat, because people just didn't argue about it. The topic never came up in their lives. But as the world gets bigger, or humanity gets more complicated in their arrangements and their politics, more and more issues arise, because the more and more ideas that we would embrace with varying degrees of fanaticism, and then we fight each other about it, and this, I believe, is a basis of dialectic or historical materialism. And today I was talking to people, on Telegram. So please come to be with me on Telegram. It's usually quite quiet, but sometimes it comes to life, and obviously I get exasperated with people who I think are hiding something from themselves. So obviously a lot of people don't like Islam, they don't like secular Quranism, and people will say, well, you're wasting your time, nobody will ever adopt it, they would rather die. And I have acknowledged that. Literally there will be people who would rather die. But I'm saying there is the theoretical possibility of somebody in government wanting Western civilization as we know it to continue. But I also know that there weren't enough Aztec priests who questioned the system. Perhaps it was more than their job's worth. They knew that for them to continue having the status that they did, they would have to continue with the practice of human sacrifice, and that would actually be a rational decision to make, even though we don't agree about the about the practice of human sacrifice. They would know that if they ever said to anybody that perhaps human sacrifice was unnecessary and was morally wrong, they would be out of a job, and then where would they be with their wives and their children and their colleagues and their juniors? So in a way, it would be rational for them to continue with the practice of human sacrifice, even if they didn't think that the practice of human sacrifice had any effect on the sun rising the next day. So obviously it was an evil religion, but we also know that the Aztecs were capable of great works of architecture and capable of making quite beautiful things. I once saw a dagger that was supposed to be plunged into the hearts of sacrificial victims, and it was a beautiful object. So really, if we want things to work, we have to act within the boundaries of what is permissible Now, what is permissible? Obviously, different religions have different ideas of what is permissible. But I'm saying that there is a rational and moral way of choosing our religion. And this is what I refuse to give up. I'm saying it's obvious what we should do. So I have been asking people what religion they would choose for their people if they were born without a religion. So they would have to imagine themselves, I guess, as leaders of their people and, and ask themselves, we all need a religion. We need a moral system to regulate our behavior towards each other. And we have to choose a system. And, and I'm saying, for Western man, there is only one system that it would be rational to choose from. And there are five world religions. And I'm saying the Eastern religions is not good enough for Western man. In fact, it's not good enough for Eastern man. So we can dismiss Hinduism and Buddhism. And then we would be left with the three Abrahamic faiths. And we would know that most people are not Jews, so we're only left with two religions. And we know one of them is kaput, and we are just left with the only one. And if God exists, in his mercy, he has made the answer clear. And I'm just aghast that people can't see it or refuse to. I like to think that there are people who can follow this chain of logic. I do understand that there will be people saying you're wasting your energy, you're wasting your time doing this because nobody's listening. But for every interpretation of any event, you can have an opposite view. So for the same event, I can say, yes, nobody's listening because most people are mad. But there is a possibility that there may be one sane person who is honourable and influential, who might go with it. Of course, the opposite is that nobody will listen ever, and that I am indeed wasting my time and energy. Buddhism has the advantage of being literally true. What do you mean, Howard? What are you sure that reincarnation takes place? I don't see how that can be proven. I mean, some people. Well, I used to think that reincarnation is more easy. It's easier to believe in than heaven or hell. But then I don't think that's quite the point of religion, of a moral religion anyway. And the five world religions that we know has some idea of rewarding good and punishing evil in this life and the afterlife. So I understand the appeal of Buddhism to people who dislike the idea of following laws from an allegedly divine being. How it says In many conflicts, it turns out to be an advantage to be completely irrational. Can you think of conflicts that it turned out to be an advantage to be completely irrational? I can't think of one. He goes on to say people will confuse themselves and waste time trying to understand you while you make steady progress. Well, I can't think of an example of this. So, if you give an example, I would be grateful. No, I don't think we can. I think you mean that Buddhism is easier to believe. What I'm saying is that the existence of God is not falsifiable. The biggest groups of people are these religious groups. And therefore, if we're looking for a group to join that may help us in this life and the next, then it would be these belief systems. I mean, the other group that we can join would be obviously, uh, joining a country. I mean, you can join a tribe, I suppose, um, but the other thing, the bigger group from a tribe would be a nation. You can become a citizen of a different nation to the one that you were born in, or you can, make the best of the situation of the country you were born in. But you can certainly change your religion. And I was asking people to think, well, to choose a religion, to put themselves in a situation where they uh, don't have a prior religion. I know people are attached to the religions of their parents and ancestors, but if they could just imagine themselves in a position where they can start from scratch, which religion would they choose, not just for themselves, but for their people, and why? And I am suggesting that there is really only one if we happen to be Gentile, because the best religion would be the religion with the most powerful being. The best religion would be the religion having the most powerful being conceivable, with the clearest book of rules, with the widest possible application, with the fewest possible restrictions. And this brings us to the holy book that I base my secular political ideology on. And I know it triggers a lot of people, but it is really their pride that makes them think, oh, I don't need a religion. I'm saying, okay, you don't need a religion, but what about your people? Are your people being well governed at the moment? Are they happy with their government, or are they fearful of the future, knowing that their ruling classes don't care about them? And if that is the case, and I think this must be the case from those Westerners who must be in despair of their ruling classes, well, there is a solution. I mean, obviously, if the morals of your ruling classes are not regulated at all, then you need to find a moral system that would regulate the morals of your ruling classes to stop them lying to you and cheating you and passing laws that do you no good at all, and passing laws that show them to be mad or evil or stupid. And I've gone through all my arguments that I've made in the past to Christians and to Jews. So, for Christians, I would have to say that, Christianity is idolatry. And the problem with Christianity is Westerners no longer believe in it because it's so absurd. And if they did believe in it, then it would be idolatry. So you're wrong on both counts. And obviously, since Western civilization is crashing and burning and hardly anybody is Christian, then it's obviously the wrong religion. Then you need to give it up and find a better replacement. And for Jews, I've explained to them that if you have a religion that has 36 capital offenses that most Jews don't get punished for, well, that's all well and good if you're an atheist Jew, but if you were a religious Jew, then you would have to consider the possibility of being punished with these punishments in the afterlife, and that half of Jews alive in the world today are in fact guilty of the capital offense of Nidakat, which is being a citizen of a city that has gone astray. And a city that has gone astray is a city that has gone over to idolatry. And if you live in Christendom, then you are, by definition, a citizen of a city that has gone astray. So it's not good. It's not looking good for Jews in their afterlife, even though they might escape any form of punishment for the 36 capital offences in the West, where most countries do not have do not have the death penalty. And so it would make sense to have a book of rules, to follow a book of rules that is believed to come from a source higher than humanity, that will survive humanity, that is above humanity. What if you don't really believe in all that sort of thing? But I do say that the Quran is the best available guide to humanity, whether you believe in God or not, and whoever wrote it. And this is what I can't get over. It seems obvious to me. So the naysayers would be people who say, well, it'll never catch on. But that is not the point. The point is to agree in theory that I'm right in theory. I do understand that you're not prepared to fight for it because you're too apathetic, you have no connections, you don't want to be cancelled. But it is my belief that this must be the solution, and therefore I have to carry on promoting it and challenging people to challenge me. And that's really all I wanted to say on the subject. I see there's another post by Howard. Successful irrationality, he says. The 3 times that Christianity conquered the world are 3 examples of successful irrationality. Well, imperialism is not necessarily irrational. And he goes on to say, even today's militant atheists spend their lives studying the Bible. Do they? Do they? I wasn't aware of that. Why would they? Why would they? All right then. Thanks for listening.